Chapter 3. Wax and 20p. After lunch, Daddy said they were very near to a place called Madame Tussauds, which was full of waxwork figures of famous people. Jeremy James thought it sounded boring, but as it had just started to rain, and Daddy said he'd rather be bored and dry than interested and wet. And it wouldn't be boring anyway. No sooner were they inside, and Daddy seemed to have lost his way. "There's a policeman over there," he said. "Just go and ask him where the Chamber of Horrors is." Jeremy James went up to the policeman. "Excuse me," he said. The policeman looked straight ahead. "Could you please tell me the way to the Chamber of Horrors?" The policeman told him nothing. "Excuse me," said Jeremy James again. The policeman didn't even excuse him. Daddy came up beside Jeremy James and started laughing. "He's a waxwork," said Daddy. "You're talking to a model." Jeremy James stood there amazed, gazing at the model of the policeman, which looked just like a real policeman. To make sure, he pulled the policeman's jacket and then touched the policeman's hand. It was cold and hard. "Was he ever a real policeman?" asked Jeremy James. "No," said Daddy, "just a lump of wax." Madame Tussauds was full of people who weren't people. It was also full of people who were people, and so when they looked at some of the people who weren't people, Daddy suggested that they should get away from the people who were people and go somewhere that was less crowded. "What about the Chamber of Horrors?" asked Jeremy James. Daddy said it was full of murderers and witches and gruesome, horrible things that Jeremy James shouldn't see, and so Jeremy James said he wanted to see them. Daddy said they give him bad dreams. Jeremy James said he liked having bad dreams, and Daddy said, "Oh, all right then," and it couldn't be worse than driving through London. In the Chamber of Horrors, some of the people who weren't people had rather nasty faces, but so did some of the people who were people. There were also some blood-stained instruments and chopped-off heads and people with bulging eyes and hanging-out tongues. They were just like some of the pictures in Jeremy James's giant book of fairy tales. Oh, yeah, look at that," said Daddy, gasping, pointing to a blood-stained woman holding a blood-stained knife over a blood-stained man in a blood-stained bath. "You shouldn't look at it, Daddy," said Jeremy James. "It will give you bad dreams." Daddy had soon had enough of frightening himself, and so he and Jeremy James left Madame Tussauds to join the thousands of real people out on the streets of London. It was still raining, and Daddy said they would take the Underground, which was a railway that ran underneath the streets. Jeremy James thought this was another of Daddy's jokes, like the policeman who wasn't a policeman, but Daddy said it was true and held Jeremy James's hand as they went down a long, moving, rattling staircase. When they reached the bottom, they walked along a rounded, white-tiled passage in which a straggly, young-haired man was playing a guitar and was singing in a voice that rattled just like the moving staircase. Daddy gave Jeremy James 20p to drop into the young man's hat, and the young man winked and nodded. Jeremy James put his hand back in Daddy's, but he was frowning as they walked. An idea was forming in his mind, and it seemed a really good idea. He waited until they could no longer hear the young man's rattling song, and then he suddenly took his hand out of Daddy's and ran to the white-tiled side of the passage and sang at the top of his voice. London's burning, fetch the engines, fire, 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 fire. Jeremy James, cried Daddy, what on earth are you doing? I'm singing, said Jeremy James. I can hear that, said Daddy. What for? So I can get 20p. said Jeremy James. Daddy laughed, and so did some of the people who were hurrying by, but nobody gave Jeremy James 20p. Jeremy James wondered why, and Daddy said maybe it was because people in London weren't too keen to hear that London was burning. The moving staircase, the 20p singer, and the top of Jeremy James's voice were whispers compared to the mighty roar of the underground train coming out of its tunnel. Like the rest of London, it was full of people, and Jeremy James found himself standing nose to knee with a large black lady who looked out at him and smiled. Jeremy James smiled back, and the lady reached into her pocket, pulled something out, and handed it to him. It was a round red sweet. Jeremy James looked at Daddy, who grinned and nodded. "Thank you very much," said Jeremy James to the lady. She smiled again, and Jeremy James let go of Daddy's hand to unwrap the sweet. Just at that moment, the train jerked, and Jeremy James, Daddy, the black lady, and everybody around them went stumbling and tumbling, and as he fell, Jeremy James's hand let go of the sweet, and before he could pick it up again, a big black shoe on the end of a grey trousered leg had stepped on it. Jeremy James heard the crunch of the shoe on the sweet even above the rattle of the train on rails. Daddy lifted Jeremy James up and then turned to help the lady, who had dropped some of her shopping on the floor. Jeremy James helped her as well, and then he turned his attention to the black shoe on the end of the grey trousered leg. The leg belonged to a grey-suited man with a round red face underneath a round black hat. "Excuse me," said Jeremy James. The round red face looked down. "You're standing on my sweet," said Jeremy James. "Am I?" said the man, and moved his foot. Underneath the foot was a fine red powder wrapped in a sticky paper. "Oh," said Jeremy James. "Oh dear," said the round-faced man. "That was my sweet," said Jeremy James. "So I can see," said the man. "I don't think I can eat it now," said Jeremy James. "I don't think you could even drink it," said the man. "Ever so sorry. Look, take this and buy yourself some more sweets when you get off the train." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a 20p coin. Jeremy James's eyes went as round and red as the sweet before it had turned into red powder. "Thank you very, very much," he said. Daddy had seen what had happened, and he also thanked the round-faced man. The black lady had seen what had happened, and she gave Jeremy James a round green sweet. Jeremy James said thank you again, and then tugged at Daddy's hand. "I think," said Jeremy James, "that I ought to sing them 'London's Burning.'" "I think," said Daddy, "that this is where we get out."